Esports and Gambling, Building a Player Base and Audience for Esports. Moderated by Brandon Mastromartino, San Diego State University. With Tom Hearne, Tiidal Gaming, Grant Johnson, Esport Entertainment Group, Stephen Salz, Rivalry, Ari Fox, Gameacon, and Robert Heller, Spectrum Gaming Capital.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our next panel on esports and gambling, focusing on building a player base and audience for esports. So I don't know if we got the introduction ahead of time, so maybe let's do a quick introduction, go around the table, introduce yourself, and let us know what you do. Go ahead.
My name is Ari Fox. I run an event for consumers called Gameacon. I also run a business-to-business conference called the Casino Esport Conference, now in its 7th year in Las Vegas. And it's all about pushing the gambling industry into the next wave of what I call techtainment, and that's what I do.
Hey, I'm Stephen Salz. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Rivalry. We are an esports-focused sportsbook, but do a bit of everything as well, and we operate globally.
I'm Rob Heller, the CEO of Spectrum Gaming Capital. We're advisors and investment bankers to the global gaming industry, including esports.
Grant Johnson, CEO of Esports Entertainment Group. We have the first esports licensed gambling site in the United States, and we have the first approved player versus player betting platform through the regulatory bodies in New Jersey.
And I'm Tom Hearne, the CEO of Tiidal Gaming. Our main product is Sports Flare, which is a B2B offering for odds and products into the esports betting space.
All right, awesome. So let's start with the basics. How does a gaming or esports company gather more people to their platform? What are those foundational elements of getting more people to your platform?
You want me to start?
Yeah. Whoever wants to start, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I think what you really have to do is the prior panelist said that there's an educational gap. When you're talking about esports in regards to gambling, I think the gambling industry still has a lot to learn when it comes to understanding the cultural aspects of the video gaming and esports market. It's as if, like, you go back 30, 40 years in the Las Vegas when they started building the brick and mortar casinos. They built places like the Bellagio, Venetian, and the Circus. They had themes that would attract the Gen X and Boomer generations, so they could relate to them. They understood them. I think there's a disconnect now between what do we offer this younger generation to build that, to get those people to start engaging in esports wagering, watching esports, and gambling on peer-to-peer level type of events.
All right, cool, thanks.
Yeah, so I think speaking for Rivalry, because we've been focused on acquiring this demographic for years, we look at it just as building a great consumer product for Gen Z. So the way that you would acquire anyone of that generation into a web-based consumer product, not just like a sports betting product. So for example, at Rivalry, affiliates or traditional affiliates represent less than 1% of our acquisition. And everything we do is like influencer content, social-driven acquisition. And you can really compare that to the way that, again, any kind of consumer product targeting that generation would look to acquire. So we don't really think about it as traditional sports betting or casino-like acquisition.
It's really hard to hear everybody's answer, so if it's repetitive, I don't know. What we're finding is, number one, it's very, very early days in terms of esports gambling, esports betting, and you need to target your communication specifically to each title, because each title has a different community and a different way of engaging. And we're finding out, which I suspect everybody in this panel already knows, is the most effective methodology is working with the influencers of those titles.
A couple of things. I think on the one side, if you're going to want to participate in the esports space, you're going to have to invest in it and become part of that community. That's critically important. But also you need to create different and products that are more interesting to them, more dynamic as part of the game, more dynamic as part of following the game and the players and being involved in that in kind of what the consumer is interested in.
Great, and so you several points touched on this of building that great product, having that great communication, which is all important, and this is something that Tom, you just touched on there, was the idea of community. Everything in this industry really relies on community. So how do you build a community around that transactional experience of a consumer coming to a company?
It's interesting because if you talk about the actual gambling space now, they have communities. There's the poker community. People played poker. People like to play blackjack, and they know those communities, today. So it doesn't. It's the same thing when you walk into the video gaming space and the esports space. Like they were saying, there's different communities for different games. So if you have, there's the Smash players and there's let's say there's first-person shooter communities, and there's varying games in the first-person shooter area. There's there's racing games. There's people who like to do that. There's digital sports games like Madden and NBA 2K. So there's like Grant was saying, there are different communities that you have to understand that community and their likes and dislikes. And I think that's where you can attract and understand and get those people to come either to your brick and mortar or to your online offering.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Okay. I would, obviously I agree with what Ari's just saying, and you do have to break it down. It is a bit of a misconception that esports is some sort of homogenous area. That's like comparing pole vaulting to the NFL. They're both sports, but very different audience. Same thing in gaming. What I believe will track more quickly, because I think the online gambling component, which you definitely have to work with the influencers, you definitely have to target your games and market and have content to that game. But I think for us, what we're seeing is going to track more quickly is the player versus player, the betting, the skill betting, and working with the physical plants to bring these gamers to their plant, but giving them a product they want. Gamers are very involved, as everybody up here knows. They're not reclusive. They just haven't had a lot of locations they can go to. So I think depending what your strategy is online or if it's in a physical plant, you've got to market to that group, get the influencers, get the message out to that community, and then when they get there, whether online or in your facility, you need to give them the product that they want, not try and get them to take the product that you want.
I mean, those communities exist for a lot of depending on the game, the leagues, the tournament structures, the championship structures. You've got to figure out a way to get into that and be part of that community and that schedule, and either through sponsorships or creating some excitement through some of those tournaments to be able to, because that's where all the eyeballs are going to be. So you got to figure out a way to be there and join that community.
Yeah. Can you guys tell us maybe a little bit about two different types of consumer? One who participates in esports and one who views and places wagers on esports. What are the differences in attracting those different types of consumers?
It's recent. It's funny because I just commented on this on my LinkedIn page. They're one and the same. It's funny because people will say, "Oh, well, there's going to be people who view esports and will bet on the esports," and then you can't categorize the video gaming player or the gamer like you could categorize a conventional sports fan. So there's guys that will just love to watch baseball and they bet on baseball, but they don't really play baseball, or maybe they did when they were younger, but they don't anymore. This is a different kind of person. It's different. They like to play and they like to be a fan and watch the game as well. So the gamer is just as much a viewer as he is a player, and that player, his barrier to entry on the pro levels, there is no barrier, because if they practice hard enough and they play hard enough, then they maybe could become pro. You don't have to have God-given, well, it's still out there, but you don't really have to have God-given talent to become a professional esports player. You just have to really know the game and practice, a lot. So it's one and the same, I would say.
All right.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the line is a bit more blurred in esports than you find in traditional sports, but also like it does shift with the taste. So as games like rise and fall in popularity, and there's like a change in taste of what people are playing, you do see a pretty direct correlation of viewership. So a game called Valorant, which is a new first-person shooting game from Riot Games, has become very popular as like a player base, and then the esports subsequently also became very popular. And then on Rivalry, we're seeing like a massive spike in betting interest on the game. So I think like one is like a lagging indicator of the other, is you have like a change in taste of where players are choosing to spend their time playing, and then you have viewership that follows, and then you have a competitive ecosystem that follows, then you have sports betting that follows. So yeah, it's like a continuous kind of flow, I'd say.
I'd put a little twist on this, and that is that there are so many small communities that we've just talked about, but you're running a business here, and when you're catering to these tiny little communities, trying to market to them, trying to deliver a product to each of these small communities, it's very, very hard to make a living. And it's the challenge, therefore, for all of the companies up here and everyone in the space is to get big enough, fast enough, and to cover enough space so that you can actually stay alive and make money and keep innovating and making it more compelling. And I think several of the companies do both esports and regular sports, and they combine that because it's many of the same players, especially as you go into that older group. The people who have less time to play but have more money to spend on the gambling part. And those are also the sports bettors. So there's the opportunity to grow this business, is what's going to keep it all together, is getting to size. And I'm afraid that I think that that's going to take consolidation among the players, not just more and more companies coming out. That doesn't mean there isn't more opportunities for companies to come up with things new, but they really have to be an innovator. It can't be more of the same.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's definitely going to start happening more and more, as it does with all industries. You know, with gaming and esports. I mean, esports is the fans of the professional esports gaming, the League of Legends, Dota. You know, you got 500-600 million people, fans. When you go to that event, if we can draw a parallel with NFL, when at an NFL event, 40% of the people in the stands would be female, probably never played football, not in any high school that I would know of. Maybe of the males, 30% played high school, 2-3% played college, very few pros. When you go to an e-sport event, every person in those seats at that event plays that specific title. They're very engaged. That's on the e-sport side. Gamers, bigger audience, 2.5-3.5 billion people, Xbox, PlayStation, mobile phone. Everybody here probably plays a game, probably even Candy Crush. You got to market differently, different products, and to Rob's point, there are literally hundreds of titles. So you've got to pick what your titles are, build your community, your marketing around that, which means you got to have the influencers who have the respect of that community to work with you. That's what we're finding.
I think traditionally the esports space, in the sports betting, or in the betting side at least, has kind of lacked some depth in kind of the amount of product and the quality of product that's existed. And I think that's going to start to change. There'll be a lot more in the player props area. Esports fans love specific players, just like sports fans. And so I think that the more you can start to offer things that are specifically of interest to them, something within a specific game or something about a specific player, then you're also going to be engaged that audience better.
I just want to mention something about what Rob mentioned, is that they adopt, these other wagering platforms adopt these sports wagering platforms as well. So they're doing sports wagering and esports. But one of the points I think you mentioned was that, you know, they're looking at esports as maybe taking those sports bettors would also bet on that esports. But those sports bettors would also bet on like bare knuckle fighting, or they would bet on like a fan called football league or something like that. So what you're really, in a lot of ways, you're kind of saying, well, we already have these punters and these bettors. We'll give them something else that they can bet on, and that's esports. So I don't see it in that way, because I don't see esports as categorized as something that's an unconventional sport that's actually sport. Esports is a culture amongst itself and has its own like ecosystem and world that people are very passionate about those games that they play. So it is similar in that way to professional professional conventional sports, because of the passion behind and the cultural connectivity that gamers have from one to the other as they socialize by playing Valorant, or they socialize by playing Call of Duty or something like that. It is a connectivity that they have on a cultural level that I think transcends the conventional or the unconventional sport like bare knuckle fighting or frisbee golf or something.
However, I would say we all experienced COVID. When the pro sports were shut down around the world, we did see firsthand a lot of punters would go bet on the virtual sports. So you will get some of that crossover, particularly with the older bettor, who probably, because they can watch FIFA, they can watch Madden, they can watch 2K, they understand the game, and they will bet on it. And so there is some crossover, but you're right, you can't build a business around that.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that's what they're missing, because if you can tap into the culture, you can tap into the connection, you can reach those gamers on a level that really resonates with them, you wouldn't get the 9.9% of the market, of that 10% of the 2.7 billion worldwide gamers. You get a lot more of them, but you have to embrace their culture. You have to embrace them on that level to show them that you're one of them. And I think that's where we get disconnected. Of course, you want to make money. It is a business, but there is a way to do it and to connect with the way that they relate to each other and their gaming that they take so passionately. And they see right through that. If you're not passionate about what they're passionate about, they're not really going to come to your product.
Do you guys see a market for casual bettors coming in to bet on esports? It sounds like it's sort of those who are already in the know, either heavy bettors to begin with, but more so for the casual people who might put $5 on a game like we see now with traditional sports. Is there a market for that?
I think there's absolutely a market for that. But again, you got to get them the right product set, and it's got to be around specific things that they're interested in. If they're a big CSGO player, then they're going to follow the tournaments. They're going to follow the North American Championships and the World Championships and all the big ones. And so if they're watching those, absolutely, there's casual betting opportunities there if you can infiltrate the community properly. Same as there is in sports. If I'm a fan of a particular team and my team makes the playoffs, I'll probably make some bets. But that's just the way it. I think so. There's an opportunity for both.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think one of the main drivers is going to be what's happening we're seeing it in the universities. 5 years ago, 0 universities had organized intercollegiate unless the students did it themselves. Now today, I think we have 500 universities in just a 5-year period of time that have organized intercollegiate esports teams. At least 100 universities have full ride scholarships. The reason that's important is as people graduate and they've followed their teams while they're at school, now they graduate, they still follow their teams. As that moves through the system, we're going to see more and more engagement. It'll become more and more commonplace, small bets, big bets. They'll follow their local players, they'll follow the alumni. As that matures, I think we'll see more and more business of betting and gambling on esports.
Yeah, so I think every sports bettor starts off as a casual bettor, typically. That's like the beginning of your life cycle. And going back to like one of the earlier points, I think one of the biggest fundamental misconceptions that this entire industry has had about esports for years since we started is that they see esports as kind of the end-all be-all, but not realizing that it's the beginning of the journey of a particular cohort or demographic of sports bettor, which is a generational sports bettor that's born in the mid-90s to late 90s and up, which is about 40% of global population now. So like we see esports as mostly casual bettors because it's like the inception point of a particular demographic of sports bettor, but it's not like the end-all be-all being esports, it's the start of the journey of a sports bettor that is predominantly coming into the top of the funnel through esports and then cross-selling and going across like the entire kind of product suite. That's like what we experience. I think that's like the forest through the trees. Is like if you just look at esports as like its own standalone TAM, not very exciting. If you look at esports as the initial hook to bring in a kind of massive new demographic that's coming into these consumer experiences, then it's a much bigger opportunity. And they're all going to start casual. So yeah, I think casual is kind of the beginning of like the L and the LTV for everybody. So.
You know, for years, the casino industry has been spending tens of millions of dollars on ideas to bring millennials into the casinos. And they've set up special rooms and casino lounges and things like that. And none of them have worked because they've been trying to adapt their old style products to an audience and twist them a little so that the audience will come. But esports is the thing that's already native to that audience. And if the casinos embrace esports and bring them in, and if the people who are the operators on this panel develop the products that can bring people into the casinos, then Steve's point comes forth, which is once you have them there, they're going to bet on other things. So I think these are the ways that this business is going to take off, is by combining them all, but noting that it's a very different customer, and you've got to give them a different thing. Now, look, the sports betting customers, to get them to sign up costs $1,000, so it's not like that's a great business.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost a lot to get an esports customer to sign up, but you've got to give them the right environment. You've got to give them the right
Yeah, I agree
technology.
I agree with what Rob's saying, but what also one of the things I think that we're missing is that that in esports, in regards to this generation, things move so quickly. You know, you can have a real popular game, Overwatch, for example. I mean, it's not as big as it was, 2-3 years ago, and it was great. Everybody was, there was the Overwatch, and but then you have CS:GO, and you have games of like League of Legends, which are still popular and have a very big following. But there are games that constantly change, and it's constantly something new. And that's the thing that I coined a phrase called techtainment. Techtainment is constantly moving, it's technology. So what you're really saying, Rob, is casinos have to embrace technology. They have to embrace the ability to adapt to immersive experiences, virtual reality, augmented reality, things that will really make it more interesting for a younger person to be connected to what you're offering than what's on their phone or what's on their PC.
Yeah, so I'll be quick, but an analogy we've used to connect all these points is look at another consumer industry that's brought in an entire generation in the last 2 years, which is investing. And how do they do it? You've had tens or hundreds of millions of dollars from all the traditional banks for many, many years, working with influencers trying to bring in young people into investing into their products. It didn't work. The thing that brought them in was meme stocks. And the reason why meme stocks worked, which was because there was community and kind of clout attached to being an investor in GameStop or AMC. So the meme was actually what brought them into these platforms. And now many of them, that was the first stock they ever bought in their life, but now they're in kind of an investment ecosystem for their 401k or their RSP and TFSA for Canadians. So meme stocks as an inception point and an entertainment piece was used as a way to bring in a top of funnel of a demographic of investor into investment platforms better than anything the traditional banks could have ever conceived of. And the brands that rode that wave were the ones that were most successful in that acquisition. I think that's what we do at Rivalry is esports is just the meme stock equivalent of sports betting, which is a bit silly to say, but it is. And it's just a great way to bring in a demographic of sports betting.
Oh, great. All right, well, I think we're approaching the end of our time here. And so I just want to thank our panelists for attending and everyone for showing up as well. So thank you, everyone.